There's a constant battle going on that I think not a lot of people see or understand. And it's being fought in cybersecurity and with generative AI. So, we're going to be talking about how AI efficiencies in cyber can actually be a double edged sword. And we're going to be talking about those things and more today on Everyday AI. Welcome, y'all. My name is Jordan Wilson, and I am the host. Everyday AI is for you. It's your daily live stream, podcast, and free daily newsletter, helping everyday people like you and me not just understand what's going on in the world of generative AI, but how we can all actually use it to grow our companies and to grow our careers. So I'm excited to have a guest on today, an expert in cybersecurity, to actually tell us about this kind of ongoing battle that's always being fought that many of us aren't even aware of. But before we get into that, let's first go over the AI news. And if you are joining us from the podcast, thank you. Make sure to check your show notes to find our website. You can email us, all those great things. But make sure you do go to youreverydayai.com to sign up for that free daily newsletter. We'll be recapping today's episode and a lot more. You can always go listen. I think we have now 180 different episodes. You can go back and listen to all of those on our website. Read through also every single email newsletter. So it is literally a free Gen AI university at your fingertips. All right, so let's go over what's happening in the world of AI news. So OpenAI has announced a large-scale partnership with the state of Pennsylvania. So OpenAI's enterprise ChatGPT service will be deployed by the state in a pilot program by the state of Pennsylvania to help state employees with administrative work. So this pilot program will initially involve a limited number of state employees with the potential for expansion in the future. ChatGPT Enterprise will be used for tasks such as creating copy, drafting job descriptions, and addressing conflicting guidance in employee policy. So a pretty big announcement. This is one of the first big government partnerships that OpenAI has announced in a huge way, the entire state. All right, Alexa is getting some generative AI skills. Amazon has released 3 new Alexa skills that heavily incorporate artificial intelligence. These skills allow users to chat with historical figures and other chatbots, create custom songs, and play an AI-driven version of 20 questions. All right, so these 3 new skills are character.ai, which is the one that allows you to chat with historical figures, Splash and Volley games, and they're all accessible through the Alexa app and the Alexa skills website. All right, last but not least, a new AI-powered hardware device made a big splash. So it is called the Rabbit R1, and it was just announced at CES, the Consumer Electronics Show. So the AI startup named Rabbit announced their new hardware gadget, the R1, which is a standalone AI device. So it's not an app that runs on your phone. It is a piece of hardware similar to the other ones, such as the, the Humane's hardware device that was announced a couple of months ago. So this device from Rabbit has a 2.8-inch touchscreen, a rotating camera, and a scroll wheel. And it uses Rabbit OS, so it has its own operating system, a universal controller for apps, and has a dedicated training mode. It's already available for pre-order at, I believe, $199, and is set to ship in March. So the Rabbit trained this model on how to use existing apps, making it a potential solution for controlling various apps through a single interface. So yes, it will be able to interact with the other apps that you use on other devices. So interesting, one way we've been seeing generative AI really come to life over the last couple of months is through hardware devices. So, maybe if you have a smartphone like an iPhone, maybe you don't have a lot of new generative AI capabilities, but they are coming to hardware devices very quickly. All right. So a lot more on the website. So go to youreverydayai.com. If you're joining us live, thank you. I'm excited to bring on our guests on the show now. So if you are joining us live, like Megan or like Brian, good morning. Thank you for joining us as always. But I'm excited to learn some things today, right? That's what we do here at Everyday AI. We bring on extremely knowledgeable guests who can teach us how generative AI is impacting different industries. So with that, I'm very excited to bring on to today's show. Let's go ahead and welcome, there we have him, Glen Pendley, who is the Chief Technology Officer at Tenable. Glen, thank you so much for joining the Everyday AI show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Hey, could you tell us just a little bit about what what is Tenable and what does Tenable do?
Yep. So Tenable is obviously a cybersecurity company. That's why I'm talking to you today. And when you think of cybersecurity tools, there's a ton of them out there. But to simply kind of put it, there are two broad sort of groupings of security tools. Tools that sit there and look at what bad guys are doing in the environment and tries to stop them. And then there are security tools that try to assess, the good guys' environment and then give them instructions on how to fix the environment before the bad guys have a chance to attack. And Tenable sits on the preventative or proactive side of security, where we assess, your cloud, your laptops, your users. We look at how everything is configured, who's using them, software vulnerabilities, and then we give people a plan to try to reduce their risk before the bad guys attack.
Hmm. Maybe give us an example of like a type of business that you work with. Are you working with just, huge businesses? Are you working with small businesses? And then what are some of those, day-to-day vulnerabilities that you help those businesses detect?
We have about 50,000 customers. We're one of the largest cybersecurity companies in the world. So it's a huge breadth of different types of customers, everything from governments and, militaries down to, local mom and pop flower shops, and everything in between. So it's a pretty broad range of customers, and different types of verticals and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And some of the things that we help folks with is, obviously here's the software you have installed in your environment, the vulnerabilities you have, things like that. Or let's say from an operational technology, even like from basic laptop sort of stuff to here's the devices that you have running your manufacturing environment that's making the plant run. Here's how it's configured, the firmware, like it. So it's a huge range of really kind of being the system of record for like state across everything that your environment
Yeah. And
that you.
so, I'm curious because I think a lot of people when they think of cybersecurity, even sometimes myself, I really just think of, oh, this is something, really that the government is taking care of. Where does that kind of like public versus private sector, where does it start? Where does it end? Are we getting certain, protections, for people here in the US as an example, like, are there, is the government looking out for things, or is it really just up to, ourselves as, business owners or, hiring or working with a company like Tenable to make sure that we're protected?
That's a great question because I think, attackers are opportunistic, right? Like they're like water. They'll find the path of least resistance and do whatever they need to do. So to assume that like, oh, you and I, we own a bakery, like nobody's going to target us. Well, if you make yourself super easy to get targeted, they will, if the juice is worth the squeeze. Um, when it comes to, well, somebody else is going to take care of the problem, I definitely wouldn't rely on the government to do that. Though I will say, in the last few years, we've seen like the stand up of CISA, which is a government agency that's really focused on trying to, again, they can't enforce private companies or people to do anything, but they've given out great guidance on, to try to ensure that people either have the resources to work with companies like us or things that they provide, and just educate private business to make better decisions and inform them. So it really is up to you, to kind of protect yourself. But there's more and more, I think, help from larger organizations,
Mhm.
or like government organizations, to at least steer people in the right direction.
Mm. So, obviously with cybersecurity, this is an industry that has been using artificial intelligence way
Mhm.
longer than most other industries just due to its nature. But, Glenn, can you just kind of walk us through a little bit how generative AI, over the last couple of years, has changed the cybersecurity industry?
Yeah. Again, another great question because it's interesting. Within Tenable, we've been leveraging different forms of AI before generative AI really kind of took off in a number of different ways. And when Chat GPT came out, everybody got super excited. Even people within Tenable's like, why aren't we doing anything with AI? And it's like, well, I mean, we have been. It's just that generative AI is more like practically applicable to more people. So like people feel it and see it more, whereas having a machine learning model that a bunch of data scientists put together and it just outputs something, it's not really the same sort of uh, everyday people don't get the value out of that. So from a security perspective over the last few years, really generative AI is an efficiency tool, right? Like whether it's cybersecurity or you work in marketing and you need to write emails to, it's great to help somebody that knows what they're doing just do what they do quicker, more efficiently, more options. And those same efficiencies are applied within security. So bad guys have been much more efficient in doing some of the things that they do. And it's up to us as security vendors to kind of evolve our products to be just as efficient, or allow the good guys to be just as efficient to combat some of the stuff that the bad guys have been doing.
Can you even talk about the efficiency and maybe how that changes things for, quote unquote, the good guys in
Mhm.
cybersecurity, right? Because I'm guessing that there were tasks, when it comes to,
Yeah.
threat assessment or detecting vulnerabilities. I'm guessing that there are tasks maybe 5 or 10 years ago that would take many hours that could be
Mhm.
done now in minutes. So maybe could you walk us through just one or two examples of how generative AI is specifically making kind of this preventative cybersecurity much easier for companies like Tenable.
Yeah. So a very, very basic example. If let's say, something that, we do as from a Tenable perspective, and I interact with the laptop that you're using today, right? And all of a sudden you'll be able to see, we'd be able to tell you specifically, well, you're using Chrome. I'm just making this up, right? But let's say you're using
Hey, you got
Chrome.
it right. You got it right.
And there's this vulnerability in Chrome that like is exploited. We'll give like the technical def CVE dash 2023 dash da da da, some like kind of generic, well, it's not a generic name, but like just a name, very little information from a summary perspective, and say, well, this is really bad because of whatever the reason might be. So now you as a good guy sit there and be like, all right, well, why is it bad for me? Like, what does this really mean? Yeah, I have enough and I trust that Tenable is telling me the right information, but I don't really get. So now with generative AI, like things that we've been able to implement is when we pull all of this data together from across like all the tools we have, instead of just saying CVE did this is this, it actually explains exactly what it's about, and like continually looking at threat intelligence feeds, stuff on the internet, things in the news. So like when you read about it, it's like, oh, this ransomware group is using this vulnerability to do this, this, and this. So now it educates the defender on like why they should care about it. Whereas before, if they did actually go the extra step to be, more educated on it, they'd have to go to the internet, start Googling stuff, and it just takes time. And they're like everybody else, everybody has way too much work to do and not enough time. So if we can just simplify how people are consuming information and just educating them, allowing them to make better informed decisions, that's a great practical application of Gen AI, which is what
Yeah.
we've been, trying to do.
On the other side, right? Because we kind of already mentioned this, but these efficiencies and the double-edged sword is that, yes, it obviously makes it easier for the bad guys to, exploit
Mhm.
vulnerabilities. So, whether it's, individuals or, state actors, how are the bad guys, using generative AI on the flip side to find these vulnerabilities faster?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of different examples, but two, like I think from a time saving efficiency, like one good example is if let's say I wanted to, whether I was a nation state actor or just like a group of bad guys trying to make a ransomware group, for example, and I wanted to target your business. Like one of the easiest things to do, and this is how it really happens in the real world, is I'd go to LinkedIn and start looking at different employees and start kind of looking to see who is who, like kind of what their skill sets is. And you can really infer a lot of stuff, like understanding what technology people have because of certifications they use, or it like just data mining, doing reconnaissance on different targets you want to do. That takes time, as you can imagine. Generative AI makes it a whole lot easier to start building out and mapping out like who is who in an organization, and how like you can infer a lot of stuff, like I said, like on technology. So now instead of taking a week or 2 or 3 or a month, depending on the size of the organization and what you're trying to accomplish, you can really narrow that down to almost no time. Um, Another easy example that's been impacting people as soon as like Gen AI really came out and started hitting the market is phishing.
Hmm.
For a number of years, like these anti-spam and anti-phishing tools have had different models to look and stop, the spam getting into your inbox. Well, Gen AI makes it really easy to bypass the existing models and things that these different tools have put in place. So, you've seen a lot of these from a vendor perspective, these tools having to implement Gen AI again to combat the sort of uh, work that the bad guys have done to bypass those tools. So, those are two kind of basic examples, but it shows how generative AI has made some things obsolete from a defender perspective, and just the time efficiency from like a reconnaissance and allowing skilled attackers to do reconnaissance on the
Yeah,
environment.
Glenn, Glenn, I think that's a great example what you said, because traditionally, even if you look at something as quote unquote low level as phishing attempts, I think historically they've always been easy to spot a mile away, right? Like
Yeah.
it was like, oh, there's a handful of them, they're all the same, they're usually poor grammar, nothing truly personalized, maybe aside from the name. But now it's like, I even have friends that have, maybe small business owners,
Yeah.
and they're getting pretty sophisticated, attacks that are very personalized, that seem almost handcrafted.
Yep.
Is that, even when you think of how the bad guys are using it, would you say that there's more of a threat for those like lower level, kind of phishing attacks on small businesses? Or would you say that generative AI, at least in terms of the bad guys using it, are going to help kind of these smaller bad guy groups become bigger and more more dangerous because of generative AI? Which way do you see it going, kind of on the bad guy side?
Well, I think you know, it's because attack, like if you're really trying to attack something, you want your time to be worth something if you're the
Mhm.
bad guy, right? Like uh I think because things again are more efficient, like I think it's gonna go more like quantity over quality. And the reason why I believe this, and you were kind of touching on it a little bit, is like it's funny, you people from a security perspective, the overwhelming majority of real attacks when they happen, whether it's to normal, like everyday people, like my father-in-law, for example, I swear to God, clicks on now, like gets infected every other week, to like huge government organizations. 99% of the time, it's because of something like phishing. Like the end user is the root cause. There's like people like always, and it's funny in the security industry, we don't help, but there's always like, oh, this huge vulnerability, and like these things on sitting on the and things on the internet are obviously bad, and you need to make sure you secure them. But what ends up, if you see all these huge real attacks that happen, it 99% of the time it's by the everyday user clicking on a link and people not practicing good cyber hygiene from a user perspective, that allows the bad guy to get in, and then they move laterally to do something. And again, it's usually through email or somebody clicking on a bad link. And what generative AI enables bad guys to do is more broadly create content that people, it's more believable. So if our bakery shop down the road, we probably don't have the money to put in good anti-phishing software and stuff like this, and maybe we only have 5 computers. But if as a bad guy, if we just blast enough stuff out, one of us clicks on that link and now we have ransomware, and our 5 machines that we have don't work at all. Either our business stops or we have to pay some sort of ransom. So I think you're going to see more and more everyday businesses be impacted, or just everyday people be impacted with just things like ransomware, because the quantity over quality is a more realistic thing with Gen AI and stuff like that.
Yeah. And hey, as a reminder here, we have Glen Glen Pendley, the Chief Technology Officer at Tenable. So if you do have any questions for Glen, make sure to get them in. Glen, great question here from Sean. So, we're talking a lot of things, at the big business level, but even personally. So Sean's asking, are there any ways to use generative AI to boost our own personal cybersecurity, right? It's a good question, but yeah, are there any things that we can do even personally?
So I do know, and I've had to do this because I wasn't just joking. My father, I swear to God, infects himself every other week. A lot of the tools that you can buy, like on app stores and stuff, like security tools for personal use, a lot of them are starting to implement different Gen AI capabilities into their own uh, technology. Like Gmail does, I think, a pretty good job of their anti-spam and phishing
Hmm.
stuff. Like I would give like a recommendation when you go, like whether you use Gmail or Yahoo, if people still use it, or Microsoft's offering, make sure you go in and like enable, because a lot of times they won't enable a lot of the extra security features because people are too worried about, or like Google is more worried about you having a good experience with it, and security might not be the most important thing. So
Yep.
whether it's your web browser, your email client that you're using, go in and try to find the enhanced security settings and enable them, because a lot of times the more and more software, is leveraging Gen AI, but it's not necessarily enabled by default. So that would be one recommendation. And if you're downloading like software on your own personal laptop, make sure you're looking to see if the features and functions they have
Hmm.
included. That would be my recommendation.
Mm. That actually is a great transition here to Cecilia's question. You kind of just said there, hey, be careful with downloads. So Cecilia asking, could you review the top basics of good cyber hygiene? So maybe not, having to, rattle off a list of your top five,
Yeah.
right off the bat, but maybe aside from, being careful what you download, being a little suspicious in a good way of random emails coming in. Maybe could you name one or two other kind of good, cyber hygiene things that all of us can take into account?
Yeah. The first thing is, especially from an end user perspective, because most people overlook that. They just think of their servers like it's 1999 and like we're still getting hit with worms. Make sure that like the machines that your everyday users are using are up to date. Like the software, whether it's Chrome, it's automatically getting updated. That you're patching your machine. That you don't have vulnerabilities sitting on your endpoints. That in the event that there is an attack, there's not like, so if somebody clicks on a phishing link, for example, with a malicious link, if there's no software to exploit the machine, like then it won't matter. So keeping your machine up to date from a software OS perspective is first and foremost. And two, from a user, like don't over provision users where you can. The whole zero trust concept. Don't make everybody in your organization administrators for everything, because when somebody gets exploited, if everybody has the keys to the kingdom, you're done. So those are the two. I mean, it's easier said than done to do all those things, but like if you do that, at least you're minimizing the field of fire that the bad guys can take advantage of.
Mm.
Um,
Glenn, I think there's a lot of listeners on this show who maybe find themselves in the position of they work in a smaller, medium-sized business. Maybe they're a CEO, or they're a director of a large department in their company. At what point, especially with the speed now of generative AI, making it easier for the bad guys, to do their work. At what point do businesses need to say, all right, we're relying on our own internal, Windows or Mac, virus protection, and these best practice, phishing techniques. But at what point do they have to say, all right, we might need to, bring in an expert to help us on the preventative side? Because I think
yeah,
once people get attacked, it's always like, oh, at that point, it's too late, and it's
yeah,
probably going to be expensive. But at what point is it, all right, hey, this is best practice, personal security, we're a small team, versus, all right, we should be, having, a partner to help
yeah,
us on the front end prevent this?
yeah. In a perfect world, it'd be like immediately, but the reality of the situation is, money might be tight. Like you have a budget, like you're trying to grow a business. Like it's easy for me to say like, oh, you should be buying our stuff, yesterday. Like what's taking you so long? Um, but the reality of my recommendation is based on the reality of the situation. If I would make some form of investment in, again, regardless if we're our bakery shop or, you know, the other end of the spectrum, is do the basics, like whatever security vendor you go with, whether, you know, Tenable or you know, whoever, whatever part of preventative security. And it is defensive depth is important. It's not like as soon as you do preventative security, you don't have to worry about attacks, because attacks will happen. So again, you have to balance things. But I see way too often, especially in smaller companies, people get like caught up in the hype, and they'll buy like this super fancy slick sort of tool that's like, that will do you no good, because you're not even doing the basics of like trying to minimize, again, that field of fire, like the scope of what could be attacked. So I you know, as early as you possibly can, like do the basics, take advantage of the security tools that do come with like different software that you use from a business perspective, you know, Mac, Windows, like, you know, the security things that they have. Like I mentioned a few, like the email clients. There, in a lot of cases, there are good security things that are embedded in different software nowadays. Just people don't enable it. So
Mm.
I at least do that. And if you do start, when it's time, and again, at any time, start investing in security tools from different vendors, just do the basics. Like
Mm.
go work with a vendor that's gonna make the most impact, and not something like this slick thing that you just got pitched by some random sales guy.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's important. So, Glenn, we've talked about a lot here on the show so far today. So we've talked about how generative AI is making it easier for the bad guys, but it's also helping, you know, the good guys, you know, to detect these vulnerabilities faster and more accurately. But you know, as we wrap up the show here, looking forward, how do you see generative AI even changing, you know, the cybersecurity industry in the years to come? Is this going to be something where, you know, threats and vulnerabilities are going to be coming even faster as the technology advances?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think as, you know, new models, new LLM, like as things evolve, that will evolve as well. I think we'll see emerging markets from a cybersecurity perspective. The need to secure, as more and more companies start building out their own large language models and applying their own stuff versus just using like ChatGPT or Bard or whatever it is, the need and the desire to secure their own models, because there are attacks against like actual Gen AI tool, like, you know, prompt injection. There's like lots of things you could do to mess with the models that people are using. So I think we'll see the emergence of more and more security tools, and a desire from companies that are building out their own Gen AI models to secure that. So I think that's something that we'll start seeing. Probably, I wouldn't be surprised with this within this year we start seeing that.
Mhm.
Um, and I do think like the deep fake, you know, when you start dealing with like that, like I think that could get really gnarly pretty soon, and it's an extremely difficult problem to solve. So it'll be interesting to see how that. But between those two, I think we'll start seeing more away from text-based, you know, things that have been applied with Gen AI up to this point from a security perspective to some of that.
That's a good point. Yeah, you gotta have your like family safe word, right? Especially as
Yeah,
these
yeah,
as these clones start, you know, coming
yeah,
in quick and are super impressive. Well, hey, I don't know about everyone else, but I learned a ton here. You know, best practices on not just personal, you know, cybersecurity, but even just having a better understanding now on how generative AI is being used on both sides of the field. So, Glenn, thank you so much for coming on the
yeah.
Everyday AI show and sharing your expertise with us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right. And hey, everyone, as a reminder, tomorrow we're going to be talking about GPT Goldmine's clever ways to cash in with OpenAI, probably releasing the GPT store any hour now. This is going to be a great show. So if you caught something maybe on the show and you want to know more, make sure to go to youreverydayai.com. We're going to be talking a lot more in depth about the conversation that we just had with Glen Pendley, the Chief Technology Officer at Tenable. So please sign up for that daily newsletter. And we'll see you back tomorrow and every day with more Everyday AI. Thanks, y'all.